All right, we are going to get into kind of the guidance and direction of the budget now that you've heard from the chair and from Ben Duncan. What I wanted to do is I wanted to take a minute and orient us on where we are, why we're meeting today. This graphic really shows us the general timeline and the major milestones for the budget process, and it lays out how the budget works. So in November, the Budget Office presented the board with the 5-year general fund forecast. This is essentially the first step in telling the board how much they have to spend in the upcoming fiscal year. And you can see in that little blue module there, that's where we are right now. This is that December to mid-February period where in December, the Budget Office is busy preparing to release the updated materials so that departments can begin their work on the budget. This happened last Friday. Then we hand the process over to the departments who are engaged in their own internal process. They develop their requested and submitted budgets, which is due mid-February or more precisely February 12th this year. And during this time, the departments are meeting with the chair and the Budget Office and their community budget advisory committees to get guidance and feedback on those requested budgets. At the end of February, the departments submit their budget to the chair, and then she takes the time through April to develop her executive, or what we call the proposed budget. Oregon budget law requires that the budget is balanced, and on April 22nd, the chair will release her proposed budget, and the board will approve it as part of the process outlined in Oregon budget law. I want to highlight part of that step of approving is really a step that's identified under Oregon budget law, but it doesn't mean that the board is saying they agree with everything in the budget. It simply means that the board agrees to move the budget forward so that we can begin our public deliberation and community conversations around the budget. From April to May, we begin the board deliberation. We have work sessions, community engagement sessions, and public hearings to help the board prioritize and evaluate the budget. And then usually at the end of May, maybe the beginning of June, we adopt the budget. This year, we're hoping that will happen on May 27th. During the adoption, the board can introduce any changes or amendments to the budget, but the budget must remain balanced when we adopt it. If, for instance, the board wants to increase funding for a program, they would have to either provide for increased revenues or decrease expenditures somewhere else in the budget. All amendments introduced by the board in order to be incorporated into the adopted budget must be approved by a majority vote. And then after the budget is adopted, we start our fiscal year. I want to highlight the note at the bottom here, and really, while these are high-level deadlines that are set up by the budget and the budget office and the chair, I really want to highlight that each department has their own internal budget process with their own internal deadlines. And so as we're moving through for the budget submission through February, you should really look to your department for those internal deadlines to ensure that you are following the process that's set up by the individual departments. Diana, if we can go to the next slide, please. I want to make sure that we review some of the budgetary constraints that we're facing for fiscal year 2022. I think the chair raised some of them, and you will also hear more as Jeff gets into our forecast. But the spoiler alert is that we will not have enough revenue to pay for all of our services. To that end, we've applied a 2% general fund constraint to all of our departments as part of the starting point for developing the fiscal year 2022 budget. While Jeff will discuss the financial forecast in detail, basically we don't expect that our revenues will be enough to offset our $9.2 million general fund deficit. For those unfamiliar with the process, the 2% constraint is applied to our current service level. What this means is that we first take our fiscal year 2021 ongoing adopted budget expenses. We inflate them based on specific factors, and then we apply the 2% constraint. So in other words, it's not a 2% reduction from your current budget, but from the inflated budget that includes things like cost of living adjustments. When departments are building their budgets to meet this 2% constraint, it's important to keep in mind the larger picture of what the budget is. It is a policy document that reflects the county's priorities. It's a plan for how we will invest our dollars in services for our community. And with that in mind, it's critical that we are able to communicate those priorities to the public. At the county, we do the majority of this work through program offers. It's these program offers that departments will use to tell the public, the chair, and the board the story of how we're doing the work and why we're doing the work. We want you to keep in mind, as you're preparing for your budget, that you should be able to explain what is changing from one year to the next. As Ben mentioned, it's also critically important that you explain how you made your decisions and how equity was included as part of that process. You should also be able to explain how you used equity in determining any requests for new resources, for one-time only program offers, or for reallocations from one service to another within your budget. This work will also help inform the chair when she's making decisions on what to include in her proposed budget. I'd also like to highlight that the Department of County Assets is always asked to prepare their budget prior to the rest of the county work. With that, the Department of County Assets was asked to take a 1% constraint, which resulted in about $780,000 being reduced to their total budget. These reductions were reflected in the rates that they shared with departments in early December. In addition, we also asked that any new services or reallocations be proposed within their existing allocation. Or put another way, if DCA wanted to prioritize or expand a service, they had to find offsetting reductions within their existing budget. Also know that DCA will be part of any discussions going forward if departments need to make programmatic changes that include increases or decreases to the internal services that support those programs. We can go to the next slide, Diana. COVID-19. We know that COVID-19 has changed how we do business in so many ways. Some of these changes are permanent and some are not. Some programs have been completely re-envisioned in a way that will continue even after COVID, and some will go back to normal when the time is right. In this budget, we wanted to provide an opportunity for you to really explain how your department work has changed. There are a few places to do this. The department transmittal letter has now a new section dedicated to COVID-19 impacts. The department overview also has a COVID-19 section that can be used to describe the more comprehensive changes to your department. And you can also describe program-specific changes in your program offers. We've modified the program offer format to give you more space in the significant changes section. We're hoping this additional room will help you explain changes that impacted services, increased materials and costs, or impacted personnel. We ask that if you have a permanent structural or operational change to the program due to COVID, you should describe these changes in the executive summary and the program summary sections of your program offer. A few things we're asking you to think about as you anticipate how COVID will impact your program. The program offers that we're developing should be focused on the upcoming budget year, which begins July of 2021. In an ideal world, we will see increased vaccine distribution and life starting to return to pre-COVID days. If those assumptions hold, it could mean that some of your programs will not be as impacted by COVID as they were in fiscal year 2021. But we are really depending on you to determine what needs to be included in these program descriptions. We recognize that this will vary widely by department. Some departments will have a lot of significant changes, while others will have few or no COVID impacts for fiscal year 2022. You should consider how COVID has permanently impacted how you provide services. For example, has the number of clients you serve changed? Or have you decided to implement ongoing teleworking protocols post-COVID? If you are budgeting any revenues like fees or service charges differently because of COVID, let your budget analyst know before you submit your budget. Based on past discussions we've had with the departments, we aren't expecting huge changes to our revenue. If you have ongoing costs due to COVID that you are reallocating resources towards, they should be discussed with the chair during your departmental meetings and with the budget office beforehand. Again, these changes will need to be documented, both the reallocation and the reasoning in your transmittal letter. Next slide. A few other important things that we wanted to highlight in this budget kickoff. You've heard now us mention a few times the transmittal letter. This year, we have redesigned the outline and requirements as part of our goal to provide more information and be more transparent. It is more important than ever, as we are doing the work virtually, that we provide a roadmap to the department's requested budget for the community and our leadership. The department's transmittal letters will be that roadmap, and we will be posting them online side by side with the program offers to provide everyone with the ability to understand how the budget was developed. The redesigned transmittal letter will better reflect the key areas to focus on while building your budget. We're asking you to provide your department's goals and priorities so that everyone will understand the framework for your decisions. There's a greater emphasis on the equity analysis that departments will use to build your budget and how that equity was used in making decisions. And there will be an expanded section to talk about COVID-19 impacts. Another reminder is that the narratives for the fiscal year 2022 program offers were not copied from the previous fiscal year as we've done in the past. As you heard from Ben, we really want you to take a fresh look at the program offers to ensure that the community can really understand what we are doing, how we are doing it, and why we are doing it. And then finally, next slide, please, Diana. It's not a budget presentation. Oh, I think we missed one. There we go. Sorry, I didn't mean next slide. I meant the bottom of the slide. It's not a budget presentation unless we say there's going to be lots of uncertainty. The theme of uncertainty, unfortunately, isn't going to end with 2020. There are still many unknowns that we're dealing with as we build our fiscal year 2022 budget. I'm asking you to have patience and be flexible with the process. A few areas where the uncertainty will show the most are in the budget work sessions, the state funding as we enter into a new biennium, and the future COVID impacts and response, and the possibility of additional federal funding.